Thank you all for coming and sitting on a nice afternoon and hearing me talk about growth. I put hacks in quotes because I think this term growth hacking and sort of this concept of like you can really drive and hack your way to growth has become really popular over the last few years. But I don't really think it's about hacking at all. It's really about figuring out step by step how to engage people in your product, how to attract people to your product, and how to really get them using it in a really meaningful way. And so I just wanted to tell a couple stories and calling them hacks in order to kind of help you think about growth in a different way and think about how you can use data and how you can use the way people are really using your product to kind of figure out and grow. So Red did a great job introducing me. You can see, I've thought, my whole career and sort of a lot of the projects I've worked on have really been about building networks, and you connect people through networks and kind of amazing things can happen. And so everything I've done in my career has been really networking with either just great people at the companies I've gotten to work at or great other people through industry, like when we were launching the Facebook Connect platform with Facebook, to kind of keep making these connections and then making lots of things happen on top of it. So I've gotten to work really early at Real Networks, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Zazzle. And through all of those things, I haven't just collected kind of some great experiences and got to see things, but really a great set of people that when I have questions or challenges now, I really go to both for how should things work better, what kind of companies are people interested in, and really trying to make those same connections at new companies. So everything I think about now is kind of within people networks and connecting them. So as I talk about these kind of growth hacks, I really want to think about what does it mean to kind of get more people connecting around your service to really engage them and get them using it? And so I'll talk through 3 different stories. The double viral loop, which is a really key way that we helped LinkedIn grow in the early days. The learn flow, which is a key change and a key concept we brought to Twitter, really helped Twitter grow. And then user accounting, which is a realization that we're all so good with our companies of tracking how much money we're getting in and how much money we're spending and tracking our costs and our revenue, but we don't necessarily track our users and our usage and whether we think they're retained in the same way. So I'll start with the double viral loop. And so if we think about virality, like probably everybody here thinks about virality. How do I make my app more viral? How do I make my website more viral? It works like this. You have one person and they get so excited about something, they share it with 3 people. And then each of those 3 people shares it with another 3 or 6 people. And all of a sudden you have this like incredibly spiraling viral equation. And it started with just one person using your product. And now you have hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands. So at LinkedIn, this is how we grew in the early days. We were trying to be viral, and we actually spent a ton of time on the product trying to tweak it and improve it so that when you signed up, we'd say, hey, who else do you know that should be in your network? And kind of make it go viral from there. And as we did a lot of testing, one of the things you'll see on this screen is that we had this form that had like 4 boxes to enter names and first name, last name, and an email address, and then kind of enter a message, and we defaulted the message. Well, it turned out through all of our testing, 4 was like the optimal number to make this more viral. If we had 1 or 2 boxes, people would sometimes fill nothing out, or they'd fill 1 or 2. When we put up to 4, they'd fill anywhere from nothing to 4 at pretty much the same rate. And so anytime you can get more people to do it, once we started putting like 6 boxes there, it actually started going down because people were kind of daunted by seeing 6 boxes. So we ended up on just 4. And that was, but this isn't like you should do 4. This is more of an example of like we did all this testing and learning to try to make it more viral, and we got to that sort of happy medium with this part of the experience. And then we actually did a lot of testing on the message. And you'd be surprised how much testing and tweaking the kind of message, especially when things are spreading, really matters. So if you read this message, it says, so I found you while I was looking around the network. Let's connect directly. I'm happy to help you with requests and forward things incoming. It'll probably make both of our networks bigger. I want to call it that last sentence. It'll probably make both of our networks bigger. People often think, stuff like that's kind of throwaway or sounds silly. But it turned out when we actually had that message in there, people were more likely when they signed up for LinkedIn to go and invite other people. And we took that back to what I call like inception, which is you want to kind of incept people with the idea of why your product is going to be useful, meaningful to them, and what they should be doing with it before they even get started. So when I would get this invitation from a friend, I would be thinking about making my network bigger. And then when I go sign up for LinkedIn, and it would say, hey, who should you go and invite? You'd be like, oh, I need to have a bigger network, so you're more likely to go and invite. So it was really important that we tweaked the message, we tweaked that number of forms on the field, and we got to this pretty good place of virality. We did all this math. Everybody here familiar with the K factor when you're doing viral math? The K factor is basically how you decide if you're viral. If you have a rate above 1, it means for every one user, you're getting more than one new user in the system. And the math is pretty simple. It's one user times the percentage who invite at least one user, times the average number of invites sent, times the open rate of the invites, times the click-through rate, times the registration rate. And you do all this math, and you hope to God that it's above 1. At LinkedIn, we were like marginally above or below 1, but it was kind of growing pretty slowly. Less than 25% of people actually typed in an email address. Most people still only had one connection in the network because they would accept it, but they wouldn't actually go and even invite anybody else as opposed to getting them accepted. So, at LinkedIn, we came up with this thing. It had been invented a few years earlier about contact importing. Hey, give us your email address and your password, and we'll go through and find a whole bunch of people you might invite, so you don't even have to manually type in invites. And everybody's familiar with these now, but trust me, back in those days, and this is 2004 era, it was hard to get people to even just type in their email address and password. Most people didn't even have contacts in their webmail. So we actually had built an Outlook plugin that you actually had to install an Internet Explorer with ActiveX to actually go and mine your Outlook. And you'd be surprised, but a lot of people did it. We had to, even 7-8% at times would actually go through this horrible process to get the Outlook plugin and then upload their address book. And the neat thing was, because you were then getting the whole address book, and you're like, do you want to invite people? It didn't take that many people to invite their whole address book to raise the total number of invites per inviter to be above 30. And that was a really good thing. But we had this other interesting data point, which is it took several emails to a person before they would actually sign up for LinkedIn. The average was about 3.2 in the early days. And so we were seeing all this spam, because enough people would upload their whole address book and invite everybody that they would now end up with we'd be like, oh my God, everybody's spamming each other. Should we fix that? But that number 3.2 was actually really, really important. That's how many emails you needed to get before you'd sign up. And so we kept the email importer, and it still worked, but LinkedIn still wasn't quite viral, because you had a couple people spamming and everybody else not really inviting. But when you signed up for LinkedIn, we asked you a very important question. What's your current company, and what's your title? And so over 90% of the people who'd signed up for LinkedIn at this point had filled this out. And so we came up with this idea that how could we use that information that we had in spades to help people connect to kind of speed up our whole growth process. So this is what we came up with. We call it the reconnect flow. And so when you signed up for LinkedIn, you'd already entered your title and your company. The very first thing we'd say is, here's a bunch of other people who have already signed up for LinkedIn at your same company. Which of those do you know? And then you'd go through and you'd pick them. And then we got greedy, and we were like, well, why don't we try to get the rest of your companies too and keep matching? And so we'd go through and say, where did you used to work? And people would fill this out too. And the neat thing was it actually ended up on their profile. So we weren't just getting you to do these kind of invite flows. We were actually getting you to fill it out in your profile. And we'd say, okay, great. Who do you know at those companies too? So now you might have gone through and said, oh, I know 10 or 12 other people who are already on LinkedIn. That's really cool. And then we'd go, oops. And then we'd say, awesome, now go try to import your address book. And the amazing thing was, this is now several steps later in the flow than it used to be, but the same percentage of people did it. So you could say some people might have had a couple steps before, so they're less likely, but a lot of people were more likely to do this now that they'd actually gone through a couple steps, found people they already know, and they're like, oh, I should go and invite these extra people and go add more. So even though we put this several steps later in the process, didn't hurt things at all. And then what was really important about this whole flow is, let's say you just signed up and you used to work at eBay and you found your friend Bob who also worked at eBay. Bob gets an email that says, Josh is now on LinkedIn. Why don't you come and connect with him and accept his connection? So Bob would come, he'd see this screen, he'd sign in, and they'd say, great, you and Josh are now connected, Bob. Bob, why don't you go and invite more people? And what was amazing was the people who got that message who were already on LinkedIn were much more likely to invite when they ended up here. So now, just because I had just signed up for LinkedIn and tagged 10 people that I knew already in the network, each one of them got a message. Many of them came back to LinkedIn, accepted it, and then were prompted to invite. So this was incredible. And the stats that we saw, and this was just I found these slides that I made a week after we launched this feature, that was our page views on the site were up 41% within a week of launching this feature. Our searches were up 33% because we were just bringing so many people back to the product. The number of positions getting added to the profile was up 38%, which was these are big numbers for one little feature. This is back in, again, middle of 2004. But even better, the number of invitations going out were up 15%. Even though we put all these steps before the new user thing, because we were totally depending on the new user single virality, we were getting this extra wave of invites going out through the system. And by the way, that number spiked up much, much more, and guest invitations, really drove up because of what I call the double viral K factor, which is, as we talked about, the first one is the new person just signed up. How many people can you get them to invite? But then you get to layer in this entire second wave. Every single person that they touch. So how many of them go and add old users? How many of them actually get old users to send any of those messages to old users? How many of those old users are coming back to the system and inviting too? So you can really start to think about your viral flow not as just, hey, welcome to the site, please go find your friends and please add your friends, but welcome to the site, go connect with people who are here, get those people to try to invite more and keep adding to the network, and you can really kind of change your virality. And LinkedIn, when I started there, I think we had under 100,000 users, and now it's over 200 million people have signed up for LinkedIn. And it was all through really careful thinking about our flows, lots of testing and tweaking, but really coming with these kind of product insights and stories that we could do, like the double viral loop. So that's just one story from LinkedIn, and probably a ton more. And I'd say to everybody, it's really easy to find your own double loop. Find the simplest thing you connect people around. Ask people these really simple questions. We just got lucky that we were asking everybody for their current title and company. You want to enable all your new users to kind of touch those existing users, but touch them in a meaningful way. It's not that useful when you're like, hey, your friend just signed up for this service, because they haven't actually done anything to tell you, and you're just getting kind of these spammy notifications. But it's really useful if the person said, I'd like to connect with you because I'm now here. And then when those new users do come back to the service, jam them hard. Those are the ones you need to get to really do a lot of the inviting, because they already know the value of the service. So that's kind of a story from LinkedIn. Now I'll talk about the Learn Flow. And the Learn Flow is really a way that we really rethought signing up for Twitter and changing that experience. And when I joined Twitter, it was about the fall of 2009. The company was about 80 people. And Twitter had, been massive awareness in the press. And lots of people had heard of Twitter. And you'd ask everybody, okay, you've heard of Twitter, do you use it? And most people would say, no, I don't know what it's for. I got nothing to say. And so we had this really interesting issue, and we spent a lot of time trying to figure it out. And so I'll kind of start with this framework. When somebody signs up for your service, there's a bunch of things going on in their head, none of which are I'm so excited to finally have this service, I know exactly what it's for, because that's never true. But they're like, oh, I've heard this is cool. I kept hearing about it in the press, or I kept seeing it on TV, or a friend kept telling me about it and said she loves it, and she says I need to try it, or oh my God, everyone's using it, I feel like I'm the last one, I still don't get it, or hey, look, I got a free trial, I'll give it a shot. But none of these statements are oh my God, I'm so glad that I'm signing up for service X because I know what it's for. And yet, most services try to make this short. Most services are awesome, I'm going to make the sign-up flow as painless as possible and just jump you right into the product. And I'm like, that's a terrible idea. This is your moment. You have more attention than you ever will have, again, from that user to try to teach them what your product is really about, to really help them learn the product in a meaningful way. So when I joined Twitter, this was how you signed up for Twitter. The big homepage said, share and discover what's happening right now anywhere in the world. So first is share is the primary word, which most people are I don't really have more to share. I don't want to talk about it. And then there's a big, nice box that's a Twitter search box. Has everybody here searched on Twitter? And so raise your hand if you think searching on Twitter is the most intuitive, easy to understand thing. Yeah, no hands at all. And searching on Twitter is the worst thing you could do to a new user. They're they might have heard about Twitter and they heard I don't know, Justin Bieber talks about it all the time, so you go search for Justin Bieber. The tweets that you see for Justin Bieber are so uncorrelated with what Twitter's going to actually be about that it's is a little bit embarrassing. So enough people still click the sign up now button. And if you click that, you went onto the screen that said, hey, now go import your address book, which I already talked about at LinkedIn. The very first thing Twitter's asking you to do is go import your address book. Go find people on Twitter, which is it's a pretty heavy ask. You're just signing up for Twitter, you have no idea what it's for, and go get your address book. And the next thing we do is we'd be awesome, well, here's 20 people. You can just start following them, and we have them pre-selected. So if you just hit finish, you're randomly following 20 people. And if you look at these people, they really weren't intuitive of why I should be following or what I should do with them. And so a lot of people skip this step because they didn't know what the hell was going on, and they end up with a Twitter screen that looked like this, which is totally awesome, because this is the blank screen of death. And you really cannot get started getting any value out of Twitter this way. Or maybe you'd go to a page that looked like this, and you'd have followed 20 people, and you still have no frickin' idea what's going on. There's a big box at the top that's I counted, it was about 20% of the screen real estate at the very top was devoted to getting you to tweet. And so all of a sudden you're in this state, which is I've got nothing to say, I'm seeing all this random stuff here, I'm out. And most people, truly, when I joined Twitter, following 0 and following 20 were like such a huge percentage of our total registered users at that point. And most people were not sticking around. Like barely 1 in 4 even came back once a month after they'd signed up. And then we did a little check on Google, and we typed in "I don't get," and we were number 2 in Google Suggest after "I don't get drunk, I get awesome." We finally took over the number 1 spot for a while, and Twitter's probably still up there in the top 10. But it was a really like just a good sign that like nobody understands what Twitter's for. So we had this big internal debate at the company, and we kind of came up with the statement that like Twitter's for people who want to know what's happening in their world. Like if you really want to know what's going on in the world, you'll use it. Not if you want to tweet or share breakfast or find out people having breakfast, but it's like what's going on in the world. And so we redid the whole user flow, and we took a big step back, and we said, how can we reinvent this? And this is now like 2 years later after I joined. This is kind of what we launched. So it's sort of the culmination of a lot of these learnings. But it was a very iterative process to get here. And now Twitter's pretty clean. It says, most people have heard of Twitter, so we get the luxury of having a blank homepage that just says sign up. I actually don't encourage this for most sites early in their stages, because most people who come to your site have no frickin' clue, and they're not even just going to sign up without some rationale. I think when you get as big as like Twitter, Pinterest, Facebook, you get to like have a homepage like this because people are going there because they already know, they've heard of it and want to sign up. So just be careful not to copy the people who are much, much larger on sort of the homepage design. But I think the rest of these lessons are pretty applicable. And so, it's got the new statement, find out what's happening right now with the people and organizations you care about, which is a much cleaner message for Twitter than starting with the word share. But this is what's really important, is what happens after this. And this is what I call it. I think this is like the magic of Twitter right now. This is why Twitter has really grown from under 10 million active users when I joined to over 200 million now, over 125 or something like, over 100 million daily, is because we taught you Twitter. You had time, you were signing up, you were giving Twitter your attention, and so we wanted to show you what it's like. And so I would say, it's okay to explain, like slow down, like don't rush the user through anything. And so it is okay to explain a little bit. And the very first screen on Twitter is just this. It's called the Twitter Teacher. It's my friend Ben. It says this is a tweet. Tweets are short messages. They have up to 140 characters and can contain links like this link. It says get started, click next. We're still making you sound like it's slow. Get started in less than 60 seconds. But I'll actually tell you that the metrics show almost nobody gets through this flow in 60 seconds. And that's intentional. We can feel like it's fast, but it's not. But you don't want to just explain. So like this first screen is really important because it gives you the pause, the breath. I'm about to sign up for this thing. They're showing me what it's about. Okay, now I'm ready. But these tours, and like if you guys sign up for like any iPhone app right now, like the first thing you do is like if this little tour you swipe through, like that's pretty bad too. Because like you literally like look at this, you like swipe right through it and then you go back to the product and it hasn't actually, you haven't really spent time trying to digest it because it only tells. It doesn't actually engage you in any of the actions that are gonna matter. So at Twitter, we really invested in saying, we want you to understand what Twitter is about. Twitter's about following things you care about, people you're interested in, and you end up with these tweets on the right-hand side in what we call this preview area. So we say build your timeline and follow people to get their tweets. And like these words still might not make total sense, but there's this list of people on the left-hand side that hopefully is a very recognizable list. There's a bunch of algorithms that go into that. And you start clicking follow, and on the right-hand side, the people's names come up. And you see tweets. And you're like, oh my God, I follow, I get tweets. And you just start to get that like, Twitter's about following. Twitter's about getting these tweets over time. So once you're doing this, now you want to really give context and framing for what the product's all about. So the next thing we do at Twitter is we aren't just showing you people to follow anymore and kind of teaching you that. We're actually saying there's categories of content here that you may be interested in. And if you scroll through this list, there's 20 or 30 categories like music, sports, fashion, design, entertainment, travel, politics, kind of anything you would ever want to look for in the news, you can find here on Twitter. There's a bunch of good examples in each category, and you can kind of drill in and out, and sort of it's like a shopping cart, and you keep clicking follow, 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 and they end up on the right-hand side. And you have this like really interesting experience where even if you don't follow anything, even if you skip and you didn't find anything that was useful, you've now had the context that like Twitter's about news. Twitter's not just about like friends like what Facebook's about, but it's actually about news. And then we go, okay, now we say it's also about friends. Go try to bring your friends in. It's really good to have friends on the system, but we wait. And we really give you like Twitter's about tweets, following, news, and friends. And if you actually stop and think about it, that's a great description of Twitter. Those are just the 4 steps that we just walked you through. So through this flow, if you've actually gone through it, even if you didn't really process what's going on, because by the way, most people don't, and it's still really hard to do, you have this framework for thinking about Twitter. You have the keywords that matter. You have this idea of like, if I go through the steps of Twitter, I look for tweets, I follow some things, I find news, sports, entertainment, I find some friends, I might actually have a good experience here, and you end up with a screen like this. And like one other thing I like to point out here is the compose box to write your tweet is now much smaller on the left. And at some point, it maybe just get buried in the nice blue button on the upper right, because we've really changed the way that you think about using Twitter by kind of educating you with that learning and that key framework. And so I think a lot of people just, I sign up for so many products these days in kind of my new job in venture, and I'm just amazed at how little I know about the product after signing up, and I still don't really invest the time to go play with it more. Lumosity, if you guys are familiar with Lumosity, is one of the best sign-up experiences I've had recently. I keep hearing like Lumosity makes your brain smarter, and if you actually go sign up for it, it actually asks you like 10 questions, like, do you want your brain to be smarter about this or this? Do you want your brain to be smarter about this or this? And you start freaking out, and you're like, I had no idea that my brain was like falling apart on all these things, and I wanted my brain to be smarter about like so many different skills. But it's this amazing process to actually get you thinking about like, oh my God, Lumosity will really make my brain smarter. And so it's one of the best examples I've seen of kind of this learning flow in a long time. So the last thing I like to talk about is really getting on to brass tacks of like user accounting. So fundamentally, like product and building all these things, these are creative, these are storytelling, these are having insights about how we should build the product and making the product. And making a product really is a craft. And we're all craftsmen here and craftswomen, and we're all trying to really figure out how to create these things that will engage people in their lives and everything else. But one of the brilliant things that we get is we have all this data to go be craftsmen from, and to use that data to kind of help us drive our instincts and our insights and figure out if our instincts are right and figure out if we're doing the right thing. And so user accounting is a framework to kind of fundamentally understand that like you need to have regulars, and you need to track not just these kind of vanity metrics of like page views and registered users, but like how many people are really doing everything. So whenever I meet a new entrepreneur or I'm kind of talking to somebody about growth, I always start with like, do you have regulars or visitors? Visitors are people who like dip in and out of your product. They use it once or twice. They might come via prompt, like they found it on SEO, or they were shared a link on Facebook, or somebody emailed them something, and they don't even really remember the name of your product. Like, oh, that site that I like read that sports article on, or oh, that place that I like went camera shopping. But they can't even articulate like shopping.com or Bleacher Report or whatever brand it is. Regulars have a habit. And Neer, I think, talked this morning about habits. They use the product daily or monthly. They come directly because they're like, I got to go to Twitter to find out what's going on in the world. You're top of mind when it's like, if I need to find a restaurant or something nearby, I just go to Yelp, because Yelp is like the thing that I use to do that. Even if I don't go to Yelp every day, I use Yelp at least once a week. It's the same thing with like a movies app. You might not use a movies app every day, but every week or two that you want to check to see what movies are out, you go to like that specific movies app. I use Flickster. So a lot of people miss this really key insight on this slide, which is the blue line is the number of registrations you have, and the number of new people signing up, and as you get new people is how many total registered. The green line is how many people are stopped using your product. So they signed up, but 30 days later, they're no longer coming back. And if your green line goes up fast over time and people stop using your product, you'll actually get to this point where they cross and you'll have negative growth. Because we did the scale of this chart at like 400 million, because at 400 million users, that's a really lot of users. And Facebook, when it got there, like had these realizations that like, if we don't figure out how to get to 1 billion and people stop using the product, we're gonna run out. But what's amazing is you can spend as much time not just worrying about growing the top line, but really reducing that bottom line, reducing the number of people who go inactive. But you can't do it until you understand it. And so the thing that I would say is like, you really need to understand how many people are really using your product, not just how many people are hitting it or visiting on some occasional frequency, but really fundamentally using it. And so I'll give you kind of a 4-step way at which we actually figured this out at Twitter for what made it useful for us, and then we figured out how to go engineer things like the learn flow and a bunch of the other growth stuff we did. So step 1 is what I call determine who's core. Figure out who your core users of your product are, who actually come back on a monthly basis. And once come back at least the same number of times per month. So this is, again, another eye chart. But what I'm trying to show here is on the bottom axis is the number of times you use the product in the first 30-day period. This is from 1 to 30. And so if you used it one time in January, how many times you used it in February? And so the y-axis is the percentage likelihood that you used it at least that many times in the second month. So again, if you used it 10 times in January, you were 90% likely to use it 10 times or more in February. And so as we charted all this out at Twitter, we found this great thing for us, which was right around 7, you hit about 90%. So if you used it at least 7 times in a month, which meant like about twice a week, you were over 90% likely to use Twitter at least 7 times the second month and the third month and beyond that. And that's really kind of held true over time. It's actually gone down. Actually, I take it back. I forget the latest conversation I had with him, but it was at 7. And so what that meant to us was the people who get Twitter are now using it at least twice a week. And so what can we do? What is special about them? So once we figured out them, we figured out, okay, I told you that you have these core users, you have these casual users who now use it less than 7 times, you have cold users who have not used it all in the last 30 days. What's going on here? How many people who are signing up are ending up in the core bucket? How many people who are signing up are ending up in the casual bucket? How many people who are signing up are ending up not using it in the second month? And once you're in one of those buckets, what's the likelihood you stay in that bucket from a month-to-month transition? So we really wanted to understand our activations and transitions to start to go, where are our problems? Is our problem that everybody signing up isn't getting it, but over time they are, so they go new to casual to core? Or is it that they go new to core or new to dead and that's it? Or do we need to get more people into which one of these buckets? And so this really helped us start to map, like, actually for Twitter, we decided we just need to get you from new to core as fast as possible, because once we lost you into kind of using it less than 7 times in a month, we thought we totally lost you. So then we did this big analysis. We're like, what's special about those people? Those people who get it, those people who get to core, what are they doing differently? And we found 2 big learnings that were really meaningful for us. And we basically did a bunch of correlation analyses on different traits of things, and we found that if you followed at least 30 accounts, the likelihood you were in core was way better, especially if you started trending towards that in your first month. And the second thing we found was very unique for Twitter, that the healthiest ratio at Twitter was to have it where of all the people you followed, about 1/3 of them followed you back. So 2/3 were just one way, I'm absorbing their information, but about 1/3 is where I follow them, they follow me, we're tweeting back and forth, they're seeing what I'm saying. And so these were these 2 insights that then drove a lot of the discover the people you want to follow, try to get people to follow more in the new user flow, try to get people to find their friends and have their friends follow them back through you just got followed notifications and other types of recommendations. And then the very last important part for user accounting is to track this stuff daily, is to really sit there and not just think, okay, well, now I've got a bunch of signups, now I've got a bunch of people going inactive, but to actually understand on a daily basis what your pulse looks like. And so this is pretty normal. For revenue and cost, I said, this is pretty normal. You track the number of new people, the number of people who've come back after 30 days, the number of people who've deleted their accounts, and then you subtract out the number of people who go inactive. And then you look at your net change. And even though, as I looked at this, look, you got 20,000 new people to sign up, but you had 11,000 who disappeared. You had 11,000 net because you actually had 10,000 people who you thought were active as of 30 days ago who are no longer active. And so as you start to work through this daily user accounting, it really changes the way you think about it. And we saw this. My favorite example from this was in France, where we saw this amazing spike. Twitter was mentioned on the prime time show in France, and we said, hey, and so in France, we had literally 50,000 signups in one day, but nobody really activated. And so we were looking and our numbers were we have over 50,000 active users in France for a month. And then we looked a month and a day later, and we had back to 3,000 active users in France until we really got the product localized in French and really got a bunch of French people on, French celebrities on there tweeting. And so it's this great kind of analysis that user accounting gave us that otherwise people didn't have because they would have just seen this spike in France and thought we were off to the races in France. So kind of as I think about this whole talk and this whole meme of growth hacking, I think I just want to say a couple of things. It's not hacking. It's about really being a creative craftsman to go make your products better and to help those people who should be getting your product, understand your product and get the value, instead of just expecting you're going to build such a great product and they're going to do it. So I kind of give you 4 lessons. One is be really creative, because you're never going to go figure these things out if you're just trying to look to the data and see what to do. You got to use your data, but only to inform your creative decisions, not to say, okay, well, we did this A/B test and you should go this way. Build lots of features. people think growth is about like tweaking buttons, tweaking text, tweaking things, but like the LinkedIn example shows, look, we tweaked a bunch of that stuff and it worked, but then we built the contact importing flow and that made a huge difference. Then we built this double viral loop and that made a huge difference. On Twitter, we rebuilt this entire sign-up flow, rebuilt the way that we recommended and suggested users the new experience. We built an entire recommendation system for getting you to follow more people. And then ship stuff, test it, learn. Like if you don't build these things and ship them out, you don't get anywhere. If you're not constantly testing them, like you're not learning from your data and figuring out what is and isn't working and coming to those insights that'll go next. So that's kind of a couple of thoughts on growth hacking. So thanks.